Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to your news station, Changing Trends and Times. I'm going to start with our Black History reflection about Mr. Fred Hampton. Today, we honor Fred Hampton, a young, brilliant, fearless leader whose vision for community empowerment still echoes across generations. As deputy chairman of the Illinois Black Panther Party, he championed free breakfast programs, community clinics, and multiracial solidarity through the Rainbow Coalition. Fred Hampton believed in the power of the people, not just to protest, but to build. His life was a testament to courage, clarity, and conviction. His legacy reminds us that real change comes from organized communities, informed citizens, and leaders who serve with integrity. As we navigate today's challenges, we carry forward his message, that the people united will always be stronger than the system that try to divide them. Now, as I get ready to talk about this episode, um, I want to welcome you, family, to Changing Trends and Times. Today, we're stepping into a conversation that America has been avoiding for far too long. We're living in a moment where leadership is uncertain, institutions are strained, and the truth is fighting to breathe. People are struggling, prices are rising, and the systems that were designed to protect us are showing cracks that can no longer be ignored. This isn't about partisanship, it's about the lived reality of everyday Americans. It's about accountability, transparency, and the courage to confront what's happening in real time. Today, we're going to break it all down: the economy, the Constitution, the political failures, the fraud, the silence, the rising costs, the global conflicts, and the stories that are finally coming to light. We're going to talk about what it means when leadership has no plan, when the people are left to fend for themselves, and when the truth becomes a casualty of politics. Let's get into it. Before we get into it, let me just say this to you guys. Um, Changing Trends and Times will definitely be your place to visit every Saturday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time as we get the news to you firsthand, get it out to you where you can be the judge of the news and how it's going to best benefit you and the things that you should do when it comes down to the news. Um, as we get into this, I also want to inform you guys that as we do this, we're doing this actually to make sure that you're more than informed, but you will get some ideas as to how you guys might want to proceed. Also, while this show is going on, please take the time, put your questions in the chat, put your comments in the chat. Let me know what you're feeling. Let me know what you want to know. And if I can answer that question for you, I will most definitely do that. So let's get into this. Our first topic is Donald Trump and the claims about the lack of a national plan. Okay. What we're finding out, and what all of us have found out, is that this guy has taken us into way uncharted territory. We're facing this situation where we're having this war with Iran. Well, good news. Yesterday, Iran opened the Straits of Hormuz. They did that just before the opening bell yesterday in the stock market. When that announcement came and the bell rang, the people screaming and going all berserk in New York and there on Wall Street, we're screaming, yay. They opened it, then the opening bell, the market went straight up. It went straight up, right? Now, but that does not mean that all is well for us here in America, because there are several things that are taking place and we are not aware of them, but we need to know so we can understand how we need to deal with this. Um, some commentators argue that the administration has not presented a clear long term national strategy on economic recovery, foreign policy, or domestic stability. So I'm going to take it from the furthest point first, and that is from the foreign policy perspective. When we talk about foreign policy is supposed to be about diplomacy. And what that means is that you more than have strategic alliances, but in order to get situations taken care of, everybody's able to take care of and help one another, is how that normally works. Well, in this case, it's not working that way. And the reason why it's not working that way is because the allies of the U.S. have decided to part ways with the U.S., especially when it comes down to this war, because it's unnecessary, it's unhinged, and it's also something that these other countries are not willing to put their people in harm's way. Now, case in point, for a lot of people, I guess if you're not understanding foreign policy, you probably wouldn't understand what's the importance, yay or nay, for a lot of these things. So let's take, for instance, let's start with Spain, which has been an ally of the U.S. for God knows how long. Spain has parted ways with the U.S. They have more than decided that the U.S. is unhinged, it's unstable, and they are not willing to put their people at harm's risk dealing with this situation with Iran. Now, I can understand that 500%, and I'll tell you why. When it comes down to dealing with situations like this with Iran, Iran has done nothing to cause any of this situation at all. They haven't done anything. But America has a blackout on updates, live news, and news in general as to what has and what is taking place with that war over there with Iran in the Middle East. And so, just case in point, so I can give you guys some backstory on this, is that this war kicked off because Israel told the U.S. that Iran had a nuke and that they were causing stress in the Middle East. And this is because Iran not only is not backing down to Israel, but they're standing their ground because they refuse to be taken over. And again, you heard me. They refuse to be taken over. So because they refuse to be taken over, Israel influences the U.S. on something that totally made no sense whatsoever, to go over and to start a war by killing their supreme leader. So in the process of doing that, Iran they're defending themselves. And so in the process of defending themselves, we're now finding everything that's actually coming to be is for the demise of the U.S. And so I tell you guys, when I say the demise of the U.S., what that means is that, Iran was not afraid of America coming to attack them. They were calm about it, and they're still calm about it. But what they did is they show both Israel and the US that you're not going to take us over. You're not going to take us over. Now, where Iran is in a place that's enriched with oil. So is most of the Middle East. And it's that oil that is supposedly, quote unquote, according to refineries, is the best oil in the world. Now, you've got parties in that region that are more than in support of the U.S. by providing bases and other spaces as needed to allow them to be there, but they're supposed to be there to protect them. Okay? Now, we're talking about Emirates, all of the UAE. We're talking about, oh God, it's several of those places over there, but I'm not thinking of them all at this point. But just to say, they're all there. Now, what has happened is because they're in support of the U.S. and Iran, just let it be known that, okay, so since you're in support of the U.S., that means that you're not with us. You are against us. So by saying they are against us, that means that they too are enemies. So what that meant is, they bring in the bully, the U.S. The U.S. comes in and like, oh, we're the big bad boy on the block, and we're demanding that you give in and you let us come in and we take all of your resources, and you just have to do that, and we're going to pick your leader. The U.S. is going to pick their leader. Iran says no, that's not going to happen. Allies of the U.S. realize that this is a problem because this was started by Israel. Now, Israel has caused so much harm and inflicted so much harm in that area, where we all know about what happened in Palestine. They're doing this in Lebanon. They're doing this in Jerusalem. They're doing this in all of that area where they're just demanding that they take all of this land and it belongs to them. Now, let's fast forward that story as we get into this war is, the allies of the U.S., that is from France to the U.K., to Italy, to Spain, to Germany, they are not going to be in the war. They let the U.S. know, no, you cannot do this. We're not going to be a part of that. Australia declined to be a part of this. And to take it further, they are not allowing the U.S. to use their airspace because they do not wish to put their people in harm's way with an unnecessary war. Now, as we get through this, that part, we all understand now that with America losing allies and with people not supporting this, they're going at this with Israel, which only has a population of 9 million people. What in the world could 9 million people do against hundreds and hundreds of millions of people? Now, using the U.S. is the thing that they wanted to do because they wanted to, Israel wanted the U.S. to bring in weapons via some of these other allies' airspace. They said, no, you're not going to do that. Now, this brings on the support for Iran from China, from Russia, now South Korea. And now, as you keep that in mind, just think about this. South Korea and Russia, which is Putin and Kim Jong-un, were people that were in talks the first Trump administration and this one, which means they convinced him of many, many things to do and what not to do. But now he's finding himself opposing these people now because They're not in support of the U.S. And so, as we get to that story and as it moves on, the Straits of Hormuz are open now as of yesterday. Trump is still talking that bad talk about, oh, we're putting the blockade in place when nobody sees a blockade. So, in other words, being a serial liar and causing all of this harm and causing conflict in the wrong place, it's caused America to be at a bad place at this point. That place is on the outside looking in, where where America itself looks like it's going to be going against the world because of Donald Trump. But we'll get further into this story. So when we talk about the domestic stability is that America itself is falling apart. We have healthcare issues because they've destroyed the healthcare system. We've got a homelessness situation where that population is getting much, much larger now because prices are sky high. People can ill afford to live and buy the things that they need in order to take care of themselves. The economic instability comes from the firing of so many people. And now people don't have jobs and they're still forced to find a way to live and survive. Now, when you think about those three fronts as we're going forward, they're going to be very, very important because each of those things have a situation that's going to be dealing with this war. Analysts have raised concerns about reactive decision making rather than proactive planning. Okay, it's not about just raising the concerns, but it's true because there was no plan to run and to jump into this war, only to hear somebody tell Donald Trump, this is what's going on and you need to go to war. No plan. What used to be the Defense Department that now they call the Secretary of War, well, the War Department. Pete Hegseth has no plan. He don't know what he's doing. All the generals have been fired. And Hegseth is making these decisions that's causing deaths, many, many deaths. And nobody's saying anything about it. Also, critics say the absence of a cohesive plan contributes to uncertainty in global markets and domestic institutions. And that is true. Because when you have a plan, the plan would normally just be where this is what's going to happen. And if there's a breakdown, there's an outline, everything goes from start to finish as to how everything would be executed. There was no sorts when it came to this. That was not happening. That did not happen. So now you got people actually sitting there just thinking like, what is going on here? Because it was a shock to everybody to know that we were in a war as of a few Saturdays ago when they actually killed that supreme leader in Iran. And so when we talk about the global markets, you see, because we're talking about what's happening with that resource of energy and oil, then now what we're talking about is, that crude, which supplies an enormous amount of the world, is now backed up, is stopped, and nothing's happening. But again, what was not planned is that Iran controls the Straits of Hormuz. That's theirs. So they can shut that down at any given time. Trump did not even know the name of the Straits of Hormuz, did not know what it was called, and did not know that it was owned and controlled by Iran. He did not know that. Did not know. So when oil was going up more than $100 a barrel, actually it got close. If it didn't reach, it got close to $200 a barrel. So that in itself, and just thinking about the world supply on the macro level, just think about what was happening. That is a major resource that include the fertilizer, uh, food such as fruit and vegetables. All of that was stopped. So that caused the market to start tanking. And when we talk about the domestic institutions that was affected, that is here in America, I mean, prices were going sky high, and they're still high. So when they're high at this point, I mean, chances are of them coming back down to some normalcy range is slim to none. That's not going to happen. Those days are past. I can tell you this, even with the Straits of Hormuz being open right now, gas here in America, on average, is going to stay at least $3.25 per gallon. It's going to stay that way. I'll tell you why in a short while. When they talk about public policy experts, note that inconsistent messaging can create confusion for states, agencies, and the public. And that it did. Because one, no one knew we were going to war. When we got into war, we were unable to get any kind of messaging as to what was happening. It didn't know anything. There was a media blackout. So with the media blackout, that means that whatever happens, happens. They'll tell you the story after it's over. Unless you were really, really wanting to know what happened or what was happening, people were resourceful enough to find an outlet that was going to get them that information. They were able to find that. And noticing that everything that was being reported everywhere but here would tell you about the casualties, would tell you about what will show you what these places look like, what the destruction was looking like, and when it was happening. And so when we discuss how the leadership vacuum affects everyday Americans, jobs, prices, stability, and trust, all of that was out the door. And it was out the door because there was just no way that for all that was happening and when this first took place, that we were going to be able to get all of that information that we needed in order to make this work. So again, we're being put in a crazy disposition here in America as citizens, not knowing what was happening, but then also understanding and knowing that at this point, things were getting pretty bad. And so the banks, so just so you guys know that, that citizenship proving stance that this administration is taking, I want to tell you guys this because this is very, very important. Everything is important, but this is really important. We have over 350 million people here in America. Over 350 million people. Well, the Treasury Department, via Donald Trump, has put out to the banks that this thing about citizenship, that they want to continue to try to find ways of deporting people, has taken a whole new level now. The banks are going to be requiring that the citizens of these people that's got bank accounts here in the U.S., you're going to have to prove your citizenship. All that money you have in the bank, they're going to freeze that because you're going to have to prove that you are an American citizen. That driver's license, that's no longer the point. That's no longer your proof of citizenship here in America. You're going to have a valid passport and a birth certificate in order to prove that you are a U.S. citizen. If you do not have those documents, chances are you will be deported. So I say to you now, family, for those of you that do not have a birth certificate and you do not have a valid passport, that is a U.S. passport, you're not going to be considered a citizen. That money that you have in your bank account is frozen and will become assets of the country. You're going to have to prove that. And I say to you now, for those of you that do not have a passport, I recommend you do that like yesterday. You need to apply and get that passport because let me tell you, it's already been estimated that the number of people that they are targeting is at least 175 million people. At least 175 million people. So that is half, if not half. That if not half, that's almost half of the population of the country. Get that passport and get that birth certificate if you don't have it. Don't care where you move to, you need to get a copy of your birth certificate and have a valid U.S. passport. Because when the banks do their verification to verify that you are a citizen, if you don't have these documents, you will not be considered a citizen of the United States and face the possibilities of deportation. It doesn't matter if you're black, doesn't matter if you're white. They're going to say deuces. Now, the other thing that also comes into place that has transpired, that's a really big issue, is America is $36 trillion in debt. You heard me, $36 trillion in debt. And the majority of that debt, way more than half that debt has taken place under this administration. Because there's like so much that's happening until it's not funny. I mean, the money is just disappearing. Nobody knows where it is, but America's $36 trillion in debt. That has become a world issue. So let me help you guys understand this. If America is $36 trillion in debt and it can no longer pay that debt, and if it cannot remain stable, that means the economy crashes. And I think for a lot of you that have been running around here talking about the Bitcoin and things of that nature, that's probably now the time that where you really need to understand what Bitcoin is, how it works, how many coins there are, however you get in, you need to fit it in. Because that's probably going to be the most stable way to go because the dollar is sinking like crazy. So let me tell you why, what's contributing to that. China has created a whole new coalition. Okay? They've got Russia, they've got Iran, they now just got Spain yesterday, and they have several other areas around the world. That includes some African nations are joining them in creating their own coalition, which will be a new form of currency. And so to take this further, remember the oil that people had to purchase around the world, they used to have to purchase that oil in American dollars. That was the petrodollar, okay? That's no longer the case because China has been to the forefront, made it perfectly clear to America and everyone around the world They have struck an energy deal with Iran, and no one will interfere with their affairs. So now let me just ramp this up a little bit more. With this war, Iran is now in control not only of the Middle East when it comes to oil, but around the world, they control 45% of the oil reserves. 45%. And they are not using the American dollar. So you need to understand, if they're not using the American dollar, and if most of these places that are joining China with this new coalition, their money is going in the yuan. In the yuan. This is how they're purchasing their oil, which means China is the new leader of the free world. Let that sink in. So if the oil reserves are being controlled by Iran, because you've got Abu Dhabi and all of these other places now have went over to China. They're holding press conferences. They're with Xi Jinping, and they're signing these agreements as to this oil reserve and how this now is going to work. Also, remember this. I'm not sure if that coalition that deal that they had with Nigeria is still in place, because now Nigeria has control of its oil on its own again. So now we're facing some real serious problems with the American dollar. I just suggest that people start planning and knowing what's coming forward and what you need to get done. But yes, America is $36 trillion in debt. 36 trillion with a T. Something has to happen. And so in this war, there really was no way out. So Trump had to take a deal. And with them having Pakistan as the mediator, they were not in support of an enormous amount of things that was happening. So where we find ourselves with no way out, it gets even worse, because this coalition that China is creating, they're finding it hard to have trust in the UN. And they're finding it to have the problem of having trust in the UN is because of the UN's alignment with the US. So all of these countries are feeling like there are no fair deals. So as time is passing, we're finding out who's still inside the UN, who's inside that new coalition, and who's out. We'll definitely be updating that as well, because that's going to be an interesting thing to watch. Very interesting. And so reports highlight the ongoing international tensions and U.S. involvement in multiple geopolitical conflicts. These conflicts range from not just wars, but to economics as well. Because if America is unstable and can't afford to pay its debts, and it falls on the world, that means that people have to move on and carry on without the U.S. If you're no longer viable, why are they going to sink resources that's going to sink them? And the problem that I have with this is, from the political perspective, the people that are in our Congress and our Senate that are refusing to remove this man from office. They are refusing. And it does not matter who or how it affects. They just let him just do whatever he wants to do. This is also with the Supreme Court as well, because they've got a part to play in this as well. And they're giving this man any and everything that he wanted. Any and everything that he wanted. And now we have FAFO'd. Well, at least most of us already knew that. It's that those other folk that were in support of this, they have FAFO'd. Military experts emphasize the cost, financial, human, and diplomatic, of open-ended conflict. These people were complaining of being in this war while they were over there. They were complaining. This only got worse. This only got worse. But I will say this, and knowing that supposed quote unquote at this point that with the straits being open and they're still trying to strike this deal, between Iran and the U.S. Most of that's already been solved because Iran's already moved on. They've already moved on. So this is going to be one of those things that you just have to make sure that in planning for what you're going to do and how you're going to live your life going forward, you're going to need to think about currency. You're going to need to think about food reserves. You'll need to think about the gas and oil. You're going to need to think about your living conditions. You're going to need to think about if you've got the money, do you want to try to invest in properties? But I will tell you this, the stock market, I still say, is a little bit risky. But I think for those people that that's got that kind of money, that if they can go in and they can do what they need to do, then that's fine and dandy, because what they lose, they probably can afford to lose. But again, I think people should think about when Warren Buffett sold all of those shares in Berkshire Hathaway, billions of dollars, and he's now converting that money over into Bitcoin. People need to think about what coins are people investing in and how to get into that, because that's probably going to be the way of currency here in the U.S. Now, I don't know that for sure. I'm just saying this is what I think you guys need to make sure that what's happening, because this is something that's going to be major, because the U.S. dollar is actually, it's been irrelevant, but it's really becoming almost extinct. And so you guys are going to have to be ready for that economic turn, because it's going to mean everything. So when we talk about the economy, the rising prices, the instability, and the public strain, economists cite inflation, supply chain instability, and global conflict as a major driver of rising prices. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Because when you can't get the oil and you can't get the grain and you can't get the product that's needed in order to be sustainable, then yes, that's a problem. But again, what this conflict has showed us is that when Iran shut down the Straits of Hormuz, it affected the American economy more than any economy. It affected our economy more than it did any other economy. And we've got to be able to do what we need to do in order to make this course correction, because the course correction is what means more than anything. And I say, that is rather sitting there in your house at your kitchen table with your family, sitting down and discussing what it is that you guys need to put together as a 10-point plan as to what survival looks like for you and how you do that. Because this is going to be something really, really major, and it's going to be a problem that's like none other for all of us. Many families report increased costs in groceries, housing, utilities, and transportation. That's exactly right, which is what I was just stating prior. And that is because when you have to spend as much money as people are having to spend now for groceries, This is like way past overkill. This is doing way too much. This is doing way too much. And if you're living, where you paycheck to paycheck, and you are barely getting by, these prices have taken away any point of what you can say, I can save at least $1. You can't even save $1. That's how horrible this is. Analysts warn that wage growth is not keeping pace with inflation, which is true because there's so many people that lost jobs at the top of this year, and they came up with bogus reasons for firing people. I mean, just firing people. And so the thing that a lot of people feared is that they're saying here out in the public sphere is that we're going to AI. That AI is going to take those jobs. AI is going to take those jobs. Really. So again, we've got to plan, people. We got to plan. And I think you guys should be sitting down. When you sit down at your kitchen table with your family and you're discussing these issues, what you want to discuss is money, supply, living, and how do you sustain for long periods of time. And when I say how do you sustain for long periods of time, that is especially from the energy perspective. If we have a blackout, then you're going to have supplies. So I think you guys are going to need to start planning for the worst case scenario to be set and moving forward. I think that's the best way to look at that. And that, again, this is just my opinion. I don't know when or if these things are going to happen, but this is what you want to plan for. Explore how economic uncertainty affects small businesses, renters, and working class families. That's the heart of the economy here in America. Because small businesses supply the majority of the jobs. And so now that hit is starting to spread like a cancer, it's basically causing businesses to start to downsize when they're already small. Some of them have already closed. But we've got to find a way to keep this going because the engine is what's going to be the key. And we, the everyday Americans, we are that key. And we can make this happen. We just got to come together when we do it. And we got to come together with a big plan, a big cohesive plan as to how this is going to have to work. When we talk about renters and working class families, these are people that, most likely the majority of them are in underserved and marginalized communities. They're surviving, but they're not really surviving. And so now that the pinch is not even a pinch, there's just cause to be concerned. And we should be working with those people, like all people, to ensure that we can maintain and stabilize this situation. And so the Constitution is failing. It's failing us big time. And it's not about the stress on the institutions, but it's about the people that's inside the confluence of the whole entire system that's just overrunning it, and they're doing nothing about what it states that needs to be done. The Constitution is failing us because the checks and balances don't work. Now, remember, we've got three branches of government. We've got executive, legislative, and judicial. They're all checks and balances, is what they're supposed to be. The checks and balances are not there because the executive branch is running roughshod over the other two, and they're allowing it to happen. So either that's planned or it just so happened to have taken place at this time. And so the executive overreach, the congressional gridlock, and the politicization of the judiciary, all of that, as I mentioned earlier, is causing the system to erode really quickly and to fail. Because what needs to happen is that if you are a true judicial branch, then that means that you are supposed to not just uphold the law, but you're supposed to impose the law on those that have broke the law. But instead, you are in collusion with those that are breaking the law, which means you're breaking the law, which means there is no law, which means justice that's supposed to be blind, she can see everything. And that problem affects the everyday American more than anyone could ever imagine, because it's the everyday American that's doing what he or she needs to do and trying to make their life better that's being taken away. That's not fair. That's not right. But it's not about being fair and right. It's about what I can do and what you can't do. And so public trust has totally gone away from support of any of these branches, because it seems like the people that have been voted in to go represent the people of their districts and their cities and states, they're not doing that. Their interest seems like is of other countries, other people, or whatever have you, but it's not about those people, because there's nothing happening that's going to stabilize these people's lives. Instead, it's taken away and it's making their lives that much harder. So if it's taken away and it's making their lives harder, what are they supposed to do? Because it's like, you can't call that representative, because your representative is not doing what he or she was supposed to do anyway. So I suggest this. I suggest people that are in their communities, you start with communities and you go out. Being in your community, you guys need to start forming groups there in your communities. In your communities, you guys discuss and think about the things that are most important to you guys, that's going to keep you not only living, but surviving in a way that is unbeknownst to anyone. You've got to think about that survival. That's real. But in the process of that, you guys need to be thinking about the economical perspective. You need to be thinking about education. You need to be thinking about money. You got to be thinking about your house. So all of that's important. Start with the communities. You guys get together, form in your communities. And when you form in your communities, all communities doing the same thing means that you guys have one big populace. That populace itself can decide the person that he or she wants to go and represent them. It, from that federal perspective, as well as in your local county, city, and state governments. Because when you do it that way, you'll know who's a part of the money coalition for the money grab, or who's there to do the bidding for the people. Because it's all about the bidding for the people is what's supposed to be at place. So that means that we as a people, we've got to come together and we've got to take back what's ours. And taking back what's yours, you need to start within your community. Because as the community expansion grows and touches other communities and other communities and other communities, I guarantee you it gets big enough to where you guys can make your own decisions, and you do not need these people telling you what you can and cannot do, and why they had to vote for this bill because it had this attached to it. Those attachments is what's killing us today. Those attachments is what's got America in this $36 trillion debt. $36 trillion. Again, I can't get over that. because $36 trillion, that's unsustainable for this country, which means, as I said, it's definitely on the verge of collapse. It's on the verge of collapse. But you guys need to start putting things in place right now. And see, the politicians, which is my next point, they're not doing what they need to do to protect the people, because they're there doing the bidding for other countries and doing whatever they are doing and getting paid all of this money. Those people that have been there from the U.S. Congress to the U.S. Senate for like 50 and 60 years, that is ridiculous. That is ridiculous. This is how long they most likely have been on the take. So if that's the case, do you guys really think you've got an opportunity of making your life better? America is definitely at a crossroads. And at this crossroad, we the people need to stand up. We don't need to lay down, we need to stand up. Because we have to do what we need to do. And these politicians, the leadership part, the political leadership, that's never been there. It's the greed. It's the money grab. It's the money grab. And I think each and every last one of you have got to call these people out on this. You got to call them out. Because if you don't call them out, it's only going to continue. It may still continue even when you call them out, but when you call them out, you put them on Front Street. So everybody knows the name and the situation. Call them out. And so we know what public polling shows, that there's a decline in the trust for politicians. And there's a reason for that. That is because it's clearly seen that in jumping into this war with Iran, that this was about the support of another country and not about the people. Because this has put all of the American people in harm's way. That's from the military to the people here on our soil. When you talk about underserved communities, marginalized communities, they always feel unheard. But, platforms like America in Black and White that amplify those voices makes that a little bit different, because that's what everybody needs to be doing. Everybody needs to amplify these voices, because everybody's important. Everybody's important. But we don't know we're important unless, things take place the way they need to. That's going to make our lives that much better. And I say, we can make our lives better, but we're going to have to do it as a unit. We're not going to be able to do this separate, because this is a major haul. This is a major haul that we're talking about, earth-shattering. And again, I want you guys to remember what I mentioned to you earlier. You guys need to be preparing for the collapse of the dollar completely and the American economy. Because think about this again, as I said, when Warren Buffett sold all those shares in Berkshire Hathaway for those billions of dollars and converted them over to Bitcoin, that's a sign that people need to be looking at what's about to come. That's about to come. So I want you guys to think about that. So we're talking about this fraud and this lack of accountability. Okay, there's been several cases of financial fraud that's been uncovered, and the misuse of funds and mismanagement. Now, normally when you deal with public monies and these things come up, people go to jail. Under this administration, that does not happen. That does not happen. So if that does not happen, why? Tell me why. Because this definitely does not make sense. This does not make sense. It does not. And the fraud has gotten so bad where now it's like they can't find the money. They just know that there was fraud. Well, I tell you this. I want somebody to help me out. Put me some questions or comments in the chat because I want somebody to help me out and tell me, how is it that you are supposedly in the Oval Office and you are enriching yourself? How about now, the occupier of the White House is now a for real billionaire now? Yeah. So, is that a money grab that's taking place, or what is really happening here? Because there's an enormous amount of money that's missing. And so you guys know this as well. You know, Mike Flynn, the convicted felon, that was the former Army officer that worked for him, that was charged for a felony. How about the occupier had the Treasury Department pay him $50 million for his pain and suffering? Mike Flynn got paid $50 million from the U.S. government, the same government that convicted him of a felony. He got $50 million from them. Is that what we're doing now? And I want to ask those that actually voted for him. So is that what you voted for? That's what you knew we were getting? If so, I need you to educate me on how that works. Because I always thought that if you committed a crime, you have to go to jail. You have to pay back your debts to society, not society giving you money for being a criminal. But that's working in a lot of ways, though. That's working in a lot of ways. And we, the people, can barely afford to live. We can barely afford to live, but y'all can give Mike Flynn $50 million and knowing that he's a felon. But of course, he and the occupier had something in common. But, you know, as we think about these things, you know, yesterday in California, the California Bar Association permanently disbarred John Eastman. He too was a co-conspirator with the occupier of the White House, because he came down here to Georgia as well, trying to help in that continuation of overturning this election, which did not happen. But for those that don't know this, the state of Georgia is paying each and every last one of those already convicted felons. They're paying each of them over $1 million each. Over $1 million each, and they're felons. All of that's fraud. All of that's fraud. All of that is fraud. That even includes, you know, the PPP loan cancellations and the missing billions of dollars from that program that happened during COVID. Now, remember, all of these businesses, these entertainers, everybody getting PPP checks. Some of them getting millions of dollars. And so all of a sudden it was an investigation because they knew it was fraud. They started to go out and do the tracing and getting this money back, but then they stopped. This is billions of dollars that have just gone like smoke in the air. Billions of dollars. The PPP loans have been canceled. Those people do not have to pay that money back. They do not have to pay the money back. Again, it's fraud. Where did the money go? How are you able to take money from the government like that, but they come after other people? Money gone. Again, this is what's contributing to that $36 trillion debt that America owes, that it can't afford to pay back. So The last thing I want to go through with you guys, and I'm going to wrap this up, is now there's been some outpouring that those COVID vaccines that they had people taking, that apparently now the side effects are supposedly still ongoing, and they're still affecting people in many, many ways, including death. Now, just like so many others, there's a lot of people that didn't take the vaccine, but there's an enormous amount of people that did. In taking those vaccines, now apparently they're saying that they knew what the side effects would be. They knew. That's from both Moderna and Pfizer. Now, if they're saying they knew this, which I'm still trying to find out and understand, how is it that you can give people something that you knew would cause them harm? That's just evil. That's just evil. There's no nice way of putting that. That's just evil. But if you can actually do that and look yourself in the face, something's wrong. Now you got folks sitting there pleading and saying, oh, I'm so sorry I didn't tell you this, that, or the other. Affecting children like crazy. Some children dying. Some adults dying. All from this vaccine. But apparently it's not just this vaccine, it's several others. And so, I don't know. It sounds like it's something like that's dealing with population control. I'm still trying to do some research on that, because I'm not sure exactly if this was like, let me just clear my conscience. I don't know what that was supposed to be. But so you guys know, Trump fired Kennedy, because, from being over the CDC. So after he fired Kennedy, Kennedy went out and started telling everything. He started telling everything and letting it be known that, how the government is acting, what the triggers that are set to go off. He was talking about all of those things. Now, we don't know if any of those things are verifiable, if we can verify those or whatever have you. That I don't know. But I just wanted to put that out there, that this is what is being talked about. And I know in particular with these COVID vaccines. So, I'm telling you, people, please think about your health. Your health is very important. Your health is very important. Please make sure that you're doing what you have to do in order to take care of your health. And so let me just close with this. Family, today's conversation wasn't about fear. It was about the truth. It was about naming what's happening so we can change what's possible. America is at a crossroads, but crossroads are where decisions are made. We cannot afford silence. We cannot afford complacency, and we cannot afford leadership without vision. The power has always been with the people. And when we stay informed, stay engaged, and stay united, we become unstoppable. Thank you for joining me today. Stay aware, stay empowered, and stay committed to building a better tomorrow. I'll see you next time on Changing Trends and Times. I'm your host, Charles King. You guys have a great afternoon and good day.